Okay, so this bowl of dough has been in the fridge for 24 hours, so it's ready to use now. So what I'm going to do is weigh it into the size pieces I need and give it a pre-mould, which just gets it into a uniform shape, ready for whatever you want to choose to do with it next. So I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to do some pitta breads and some naan breads, and I'll show you a pizza base as well. So doing the naan breads at 100 grams. So say 3 of those. Pitta breads I'm going to do 80 grams, a bit smaller. You can do it whatever size you like. You can do it a bit bigger if you want, or smaller. But I find 80 is good for a pitta and 100 good for a naan. And I'd say for kind of a 8-inch pizza, like an individual pizza, I'd go 150 grams. That's going to be a thin base. So there's a large one there. What do we got left? Do one more pitta. Another 80. A little bit left, which we'll do something with. So to do the pre-mould, you need a little bit of flour. I'll show you on the pizza base because it's bigger. It's quite full of air, but we're going to knock some of that out. So you're bringing your side up, pushing it in, so that all those rough edges are going to be rounded, and just keep working around. Give it a good push. You can feel the air bubbles coming to the edge, the big ones. And we're going to burst those or make them smaller. And you just keep going around until you have a kind of a pleat at the bottom, all the pieces there, and pinch them together. And if you want, you can just pinch it in at the sides to make it a bit tighter and a bit rounder. Especially for a pizza base, you want to start as round as possible. And with the smaller pieces, you get rid of most of the flour. Whichever side is smoothest out of these sides are quite rough, so they'll go down. That will be the bottom. You can just push down with your hand so it sticks to the table a bit, and then you give it a good squeeze, and you kind of make a cage with your fingers, and you're pushing down with the palm, and it should stick to the table more. And as you work round, pushing down quite hard, it tightens up into a nice ball, and you'll see there's the pleat at the bottom in place. Show you one more. Do it with one hand. So pushing down really quite hard and moving quickly so it grips the table, not your hand. Make a cage with your fingers to just keep it rotating under there, and that's quite a nice ball there. Same with the bigger ones. If they're a bit bigger, you might not fit your hand over, so you can do a bit of both. Just tuck the edges in, which will make it smaller, and then finish it off like this. You get nice round balls. This is the same way you'd mould a round bread roll. If you wanted to do like a burger roll, you just mould them round first and then use a rolling pin to flatten it out to the size you want. Do these last two together. So there you go, there's the 4 naan breads, 3 pitta and a pizza base. So they need to rest now because you can't stretch them because they've just been moulded, so they're quite tight. But if you leave them for, I'd say 20 minutes, then they'll be soft enough to work again. The pizza base you want to leave for a good 45 minutes because it needs to be really relaxed and really able to stretch. So I'm going to put some flour down so they don't stick to the bench too much. And give them a bit of space because they will rise, even though the dough's cold, they will rise a bit in this 20 minutes. Just arrange them, a bit of space, and I'm just going to get a clean tea towel and cover them over, because again, if there's any kind of draft, it'll just form a skin on the outside and it'll all tear. So cover them up, time it for 20 minutes for the flatbreads, and I'll wait a bit longer for the pizza base. So it's had 20 minutes resting under the cloth now. So I'm going to do the pitta breads, which are these 3 little guys here. The rest I'll cover back up whilst I'm not using it, because it only takes a couple of minutes before it gets the skin over it and kind of ruins it. So you take one of them, they're a bit more supple now because they've had a rest. Bit of flour on the top and bottom. I'm just going to use a rolling pin starting from the middle. If it starts to stick, just get a bit more flour on there. You need them pretty thin, because when they're really thin, as soon as they hit the hot oven, they're going to puff up. The outside's going to set really quickly in the hot temperature, and the moisture and the air bubbles that are trapped inside are just going to expand really quickly and will just make a big pocket like a pita bread, you know. You can make this out of any dough. It's really, you can't really go wrong with a pita bread. It's so easy. You can do them round if you want. You can do them whatever shape you like. They've just got to be quite thin. That's all. So I'd say that's about 6 inches long, maybe 3 inches wide. Just get those on a baking tray with. You've got to use baking paper. Some people use grease-proof paper, and that's just a nightmare. The bread will stick to it, and you'll never get it off. So it's probably easier if you just flatten them out a little bit before you start. I'll do 2 at once now. Bit more flour on that one. And these ones are actually still quite tight, I guess because the dough's been in the fridge. So if they're too tight and they don't want to roll out, just give them another 10 minutes underneath the tea towel to relax a bit more. Okay, that'll do. So there's all 3 on the baking tray. I've got the oven preheated as hot as it'll go, so about 240 Celsius or whatever your oven goes up to. They're only going to take, I'd say, 3 to 5 minutes, but I'll show you them when they're done and let you know how long it took. So they've just come out. It actually took 7 minutes for these. So if you can see, they've all puffed up a lot, which is basically all you need. You just need them all to completely inflate like that. Just taking a little bit of colour on the sides. You really don't want to cook them too long, because this top surface will then completely dry out and become brittle, and as soon as you try and cut into them, it'll just shatter. So yeah, so it's still quite soft. You can still squeeze it. I mean, it's really hot. See the steam coming out. Yeah, so you let that cool down on a tray, and they might well collapse, but that's fine. You can still cut into them, or you can pop them in a toaster to puff them up afterwards. Okay, so we're going to go on to the naan breads now. Now, if I'm doing anything that's going to be, I'm going to be cooking these on a hot griddle or a hot pan, and if you use normal white flour to dust it, that flour's got some natural sugar in it and it's super fine, and the flour on it will just burn and it won't taste so good. So I use fine cornmeal. It's like this yellow flour, and the difference with that is corn flour only contains starch and no sugars, so it won't burn, or it won't burn as easily. So I'm just going to get a teeny bit of the corn flour on there, and I'm just going to pinch around the edge and then work inwards just to make the whole thing a bit thinner. Not using a rolling pin for this, because we actually want to keep the structure of bubbles in there. So the thinner it gets, the more easy it is to stretch it. So I'm just using a pinching with my fingers and thumbs here. You can put it down on the bench and just press it out a little bit, but use the tips of your fingers, because that will keep the bubbles intact, most of them. You see them start forming. And as you pass it round your hands, you can start giving it a little bit of a stretch. And we want the whole thing on this to be about the same thickness. So as you pass it round, give it a little stretch, and then once it gets thin enough, you'll notice that the weight of the dough is actually stretching the middle bit as well. So it takes a little while. If it's not stretching enough, you can just put it down on the bench and just give it a couple of minutes to relax a little bit. You can even move on to the other ones if you're doing a few at once. So that's not far off actually. It's going to be about the same size as those pittas, so I guess about 6 inches for a 100-gram piece like this. So it's pretty thin. You can feel with your fingers any thicker bits, just give them a little squeeze, a little stretch, whatever you feel right to even it out. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, that's just a rough thing. And any really big bubbles that form on the end you can just pop, because they'll just blister up and burn. So I've had my pan on the high flame for probably about 5 minutes now. It's screaming hot, completely dry, no oil or anything. And then we're going to take the naan bread. There's a bit of room. It's not as big as the pan. Let's see, yeah, it's around about 6 inches. And we're just going to drop it straight on there. Probably only take about a minute for this stage. Which might not be the best viewing, but I'll leave it just so you can see what's going on. And I've also got my electric grill fired up to maximum. That's been going for a good 10 minutes. You want it really hot. You want the pan and the grill really hot to try and replicate what's going to go on in a tandoori oven when they normally cook them. So it's puffing up quite nicely now, quite quickly. But it's not forming a pocket like the pitta bread did, because we've got all the big bubbles intact, whereas the pitta bread would have been rolled out. So all the bubbles are small, they're tight, they've just been stretched, and they're all going to rupture and make a pocket. That does sometimes happen with a naan. If you get one big pocket, you can just shove a knife in the side and let the gas out of that. So I think that's had nearly a minute. We're just going to check the bottom. A little bit more. You just want a nice sort of like leopard spots of charring on the bottom. Not too black, but just a nice bit of colour. So just keep going. Check it every 20 seconds. So that's, you might see that it's starting to get the spots where it's starting to char, so that'll do for me. So I'll put it on my grill tray. The dough at the top isn't cooked through yet. That's just cooked the bottom and sealed it. So what I'm going to do is just brush it with some melted butter. You don't have to. I mean, you can use olive oil, or you could leave it dry if you want. But it gets a really nice sort of crispy top with a bit of butter. Or if you make some garlic butter up and melt that, it's delicious. So under a hot grill, on the highest shelf, and I'll show you when it comes out. They only take about 30 seconds to a minute, I'd say. So I'd say that was about a minute, maybe just over, on a hot grill. And you can see that it's puffed up. You've got the butters start to brown on there, which gives it a beautiful flavour. You just can't go wrong. It's so soft. You can see steam coming out of it when you squeeze it. It's just light, fluffy, moist on the inside, crispy on the outside. That will go with anything. That will replace any white roll at a barbecue. Just stack that up with meat, it'll be a beauty. And finally onto the pizza base. So that's the 150-gram piece, and that's actually been resting for probably over an hour now, but I'd say an hour, hour and a half is great. You want it as stretchy and relaxed as possible. So it's basically the same as the naan bread in that you start with a round ball. You're going to press it all out a little bit, just to kind of try and keep the shape even at this stage. Any big bubbles at the edge, just give them a slap. And you can press around, leaving just like a 5mm bit of crust. That's going to make that signature puffed up bit of crust. So you push just inside that, and that will give a point where it will stretch from. And then you can press out all that centre bit, and then just leave that outside ring intact if you can. And that gives you something you can start to work with. Same way, just pass that crust that you've now got around your hands. If you can see that very well. My hands are in the way. I'll show you from the back. So because this is a bigger piece of dough, it's just a bit heavier, which means there's more weight pulling it down. So just keep it going, and you're just squeezing the edges and giving it a teeny stretch there. And you can keep going like that, but the middle bit then will start to be a bit thick, so you're going to get your hands underneath. And you can see what I'm doing with my fingers there, just stretching that very central bit out. Do your best not to put your thumb through it, because that's game over really. Pizza toppings are all going to fall through. So a little stretch like that, and then back to passing it. Like I said before, the thinner it gets, the easier it will stretch. So you might actually want to rest the bottom on the worktop so it doesn't just snap and put your finger through it. And we're just looking to get this about, I guess, 8 inches. That's what size my frying pan is. So not too far off. And like with the naan, the dry frying pan, it's searing hot, 5 minutes on full flame. It's getting really stretchy now. You've got to be careful because it's getting wafer thin in the middle. So at that point, maybe just on the back of your hand, so there's no pointy bits, you're just using your knuckles. And you can kind of see the thin bits, you can pretty much see your fingers through. So that's actually only about 6 or 7 inches, but that's what I'm going to go with for this size piece of dough actually. I'll show you it in the pan. So it's going to be the same cooking method as the naan completely. And it's going to have a minute or so in a really hot pan. That'll set the bottom, give it some colour, and the edges should start to puff up like that typical traditional hand stretch pizza. So let's see. So as that dough hits the intense heat of that pan, the bubbles are going to expand again, and we've got the bigger bubbles in the crust which are intact, and because the dough's rested, those bubbles will be able to stretch, so you should see the crust puff up much bigger than the centre. Should. And then once this has had a minute or so, just to get that kind of leopard spot effect on the bottom, straight under a hot grill. You don't need to get any colour on this really. I mean, I'm making these so that you could just then top them with whatever you like. Once they're cold and you've done as many as you want, you can top them with whatever you like and put them in the oven, a hot oven, just until like the cheese and the toppings are how you like them, because the base will be cooked through. So let's have a little peek underneath, see how it's doing. A little bit longer, 30 seconds. So by the look of this, it looks like I should have got the middle bit a little bit thinner, but I was a bit impatient because this video would be very boring if I kept on stretching it so it was thin enough. But that's still nice, still got that crust around the edge. So we'll turn that off. Have a little look. So the top is still kind of raw, still got the bubbles there, still soft. The bottom is cooked through now, it's got a little bit of colour, but I'm just going to get it on the grill pan. What is nice actually, as I've got some melted butter, brush a little bit of that just around that rim, and that will stop the crust drying out too much when you actually come to bake your pizza. And that should colour a bit more. Then just pop it under the grill for a minute or so until the top bit is set to touch. So that's had about a minute and a half under the grill. It did start puffing up in the middle, so I've just got my trusty knife, and wherever it's, as soon as it starts coming up, just watch it and then just skewer it, because if you leave it too long it will set puffed up and it won't come back down. But if as soon as you see a big bubble forming, just lance it, push it back down with the back of the knife, and there you go, that's just ready to top. And just probably, once you've got it topped, because the dough is actually cooked, you put it in a hot oven, and I don't know, as soon as your cheese looks nice and it's all done, then you're ready to go. You can make a few of these ahead of time, you can bag them up, you can freeze them, so you can just make one big batch and then pull them out whenever you want. And there you go, that's the flatbread masterclass.